like us. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. They not.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening, whenever this video finds you. Last time I covered the prosecution's examination of Paul Ferguson. If you don't know who Paul Ferguson is, I highly encourage that you go find out from someone else and not watch the first half of my part 1 of this video. It is not very good. But that's okay, because I went to the lab and I taught myself a few things and I came back better. Because, truth be told, I'd never get something right away, so I always aim to just be 1% better than my start point and 1% better each time I try. Anyway, in this case, if you don't know, a quick overview: Shonda Vander Ark and Paul Ferguson are responsible for the torture and death of Timothy Ferguson, Shonda's 15-year-old autistic son, Paul Ferguson's autistic brother. The whole reason I even decided to make a video on this case is that on one of his jailhouse phone calls, Paul Ferguson mentioned how YouTubers need to let the memory of Timothy rest. And even though a lot of things in this case angered me, that kind of angered me much more than anything else. Because, in truth, how dare you? Shonda and Paul did not give Timothy a moment of rest in his time with them. And for Paul to sit there and say, people need to not talk about this case and let the memory of Timothy rest, that really, really angered me. Because, in truth, I feel that the only reason he even said that is because he doesn't want people to know what he did. Paul and his mother are birds of a feather. They are just alike, and I'll be pointing out a lot of their similarities. However, I will say, though, the biggest difference between Paul and Shonda is that Paul does have a shred of humanity and dignity, whereas Shonda has none. Alright, now, we have seen Paul get ripped apart by the prosecution. Let's see him get ripped apart by the defense. Roll the clip.
You referred to your mother as either mom or mama. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then in the, you had an interview with Detective Pieskey. Do you remember that? Detective, are you here? Could you stand at least so you can see? Do you remember that gentleman there? Detective Pieskey?
Not perfectly, but
okay.
Yes.
2 days. Thank you. 2 days after after the event, after Tim passes, you have an interview in his office. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
You're wearing shorts and your knees were up and that sort of thing. It was warm outside.
Yes.
You remember that? And during that interview, you referred to your mother as mom or mother. Do you remember that? Or mother or mama, something like that, right?
Yes, sir.
And about 3 weeks later, well, however long it was, 3 weeks later, we had a preliminary examination, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you referred to your mother as Shonda, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And one of the things that happened between the time that you interviewed with Detective Pieskey and the time you testified your preliminary examination is you cut a deal, didn't you? Take your time.
No, sir. Not that I'm aware of.
You're not aware. You testified to it at the prelim. Don't you remember?
Yo, I can't with this defense attorney. Look, he did not have to start off like that. He asked Paul if he remembered him, and then mentioned how Paul had shorts on and how his knees were up. This kind of made me laugh because what a discreet yet somehow overt way of saying that Oh, you remember your knees were up and your balls were hanging out and you were over in child's pose hugging yourself all unmanly and cowardly. You remember that, Paul? Do you remember that version of yourself? Like, what a way to start off. Like, bam! Confidence. Tear down.
Do you know if your mother was charged with first-degree murder?
Yes.
Okay, and according to me, first-degree child abuse, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And according to your testimony and other things you said, you're the one who put the hot sauce in this boy's mouth.
Per her orders, yes.
Timothy's mouth. You're the one who put the cuffs, the bracelets on, the ties on him, right?
Per her orders.
You're the one who put him in the cold baths, correct?
Per her orders.
You're the one who said, in one of those texts that you've never wanted to beat somebody up, and I forget the exact word, beat somebody so bad in your entire life. You said that, was that per her orders?
No.
You also said that if something happens, I'm gonna kill him. Was that her orders too?
No.
Okay, all right,
And-
that's what I'm asking. But you're not charged with first-degree murder, are you?
No.
So I gotta say that this defense attorney is actually doing a good job at his job. He's not responsible for having to defend Shonda. He's a public defender. He has to. But he does bring up a very good point that is, I think, actually hurting Shonda a little bit. But there is no doubt that it definitely played a part in getting Paul his sentence later, I think. And we'll get into that later. But Shonda is charged and Paul isn't. And as you saw in the clip from before, Paul was calling her mom and mama. However, now he calls her Shonda. And the defense attorney is doing a great job at pointing out how well the detective flipped Paul against his mother, and that he did the torture itself. He's the one who did the handcuffs. He's the one who did the ice baths. He's the one who poured the hot sauce in Timothy's mouth. And yet he's not facing the murder charge. And that's a good tactic, in my opinion, to point out that, hey, it's basically a whataboutism, but it is a very compelling whataboutism in this case. And also, I lost my train of thought for a second there. It really does disturb me that Paul said he's never wanted to beat someone more in his life, because I imagine that he said this around, and I'll check it later off camera, but I think it was sometime around the time that Timothy would have been at his absolute weakest. And I want you to think about that. Timothy is at his absolute weakest. And Paul says he's never wanted to beat someone more in his life. Think about that. Timothy is, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, Timothy is a walking skeleton. He's so weak he can barely stand, and yet Paul's thing is, I've never wanted to beat someone more in my entire life. And we'll get into what I think he did to Timothy later, because I really don't like Paul.
The prosecutor during his opening comments talked about hypothermia. You know what hypothermia is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell the jury, what's hypothermia?
When the body suffers from extreme cold to a high extent.
Okay. And you're the one who put him in a bath for 7 hours, 6 hours, whatever it was, the day he died?
Yes, per Shonda's
Okay.
orders.
All right. But you're not charged with first-degree murder, are you?
No.
It's a good deal, isn't it?
This defense attorney actually does post a very good point. Paul was actually the one that did the act that killed Timothy. That was Paul. So it's actually kind of shocking that he even got a deal. But at the same time, I guess it isn't, because I suppose there could have been reasonable doubt if they couldn't flip him, and between the two of them, Paul is the weak link. I mean, he's just weak, but he is clearly the weak link, the ill-prepared one. Not that Shonda is much better. She is actually just as intelligent as 300 IQ Paul here. The only difference is Shonda has excellent memory and low intelligence, whereas Paul just has low intelligence.
In fact, it is your desire that your mother in this trial, in this case, and get you out from under, isn't it?
That was what I said in that letter.
The letter I'm holding here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was furious at that time.
You're furious at that
I was not
time.
thinking straight.
Are you furious now?
No.
Got him! That your mother loved every one of us.
That was what I believed.
You don't believe that now?
No.
Do you believe that now? That's a strange question coming from the perspective of Shonda's defense. I'm not too sure what that does for her defense. But, as much as I don't want to sympathize with Paul, I do sympathize with him here. Because I do remember being in denial about my parents loving me and coming to grips with that they didn't. And that is a painful reality to accept. And, yeah. I don't know. That question kind of hit strangely close to home for me. And, yeah, for the first time, I sympathize with Paul. Alright, so, I know that was nothing in that clip right there, but I just want to take a moment to point out how much Shonda looks like the Wicked Witch of the West to me. Like, if you paint her green and get her one of those little witch hats, she will look exactly like the Wicked Witch of the West, and you cannot tell me otherwise. I said this in my part 1, but again, not a great video. But I think she was going for an innocence type of appearance, and that was the only thing in the skill level of the group or people or the women available who could do her hair, and she chose the double braid. Why not a single braid? I don't know. And why she didn't take those double braids and like tie them into some type of bun? I don't know. It would have really fit her aesthetic as a potential lawyer if she had done that. And truthfully, I think it would have aided her. But that being said, thank the creator that she didn't, because it made it that much easier to find her guilty, I'm sure.
All right. Why did you tell? What was the original story you told the police as to why Timothy slept in that room? What did you all call it? The spare room? The closet?
The small room?
The small room. Do you remember the original story you told them?
That he wanted to be in there?
Okay. And you told them that, and didn't you also tell them that because Timothy was taking things apart, his bed was not safe to sleep on, and they weren't, because he'd taken loose the bolts and screws?
Yes.
And you told them that as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Timothy wanted to be in there. You really want us to believe that he wanted that. You know what? Actually, I was always taught that there's like usually 1% of truth to everything. And I think there might actually be 1% of truth to Timothy wanting to be in there. Where's the camera? Wanting to be in there. I think that Timothy would very likely hide from them in that closet, and they turn that into a prison. I think I see a trend of them taking the things that Timothy likes and turning it against him. For example, I do think that Timothy liked spicy food. However, I do not think that Timothy has some unusual tolerance to spice. I think that Timothy had an average level of tolerance to spice, and he just enjoyed spicy food. Maybe Louisiana hot sauce, maybe some buffalo medium wings, slightly hotter than buffalo wild, but not quite spicy. I would be willing to believe that. However, I do not believe that, I mean, even if that is true, they took that he liked spicy food and turned that into a punishment. Let's get the hottest hot sauce we could find. I think it was called Extreme Regret. And then they say, oh, well, if probably said, if you're going to hide from us in a closet, well, we'll make that closet into your prison. That's the type of timing I think that Paul and Shonda were on. Just me personally, that's what I think.
Tell me about, how was the hot sauce administered?
Either slathered on bread or administered directly orally
Okay. And you would do those things, correct?
under my mother's orders, yes.
Under your mother's orders.
Under my mother's orders. Alright, so this really bugs me because the sadistic nature of using the hot sauce as a punishment is just next level. Because not only does it burn in contact with your saliva, it burns in your stomach when you're digesting it if you can't handle it. And then it burns a third time when it's leaving you. So the sadisticness of them to force feed him the hottest hot sauce and just to watch him suffer is literally next level. Like, I honestly think that Shonda might have been Hitler's spirit reincarnated, and I know that is a bold and wild statement, but seriously, she is Hitler reincarnated and Paul was just following orders. Sound familiar?
And you mentioned today that you fed Tim a good meal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. How twisted is it that he considers, and I can't remember if it was a buttered toast or if it was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with eggs. How twisted is it that it's been so long since Timothy ate that Paul would consider a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some scrambled eggs an actual meal? That is not an actual meal at all. It's a start, but it's not an actual meal.
Why is it, it's not in the police reports, right?
No.
And it's not in the interview that you did, right? There's no mention of it in your interview with Detective Pieskey, is that correct?
Was there?
Yeah, I'm sure. There's no mention of it, correct? If you don't remember, that's fine.
I don't remember.
Okay, there was no mention of it at the preliminary examination when you were under oath, correct?
I don't believe I was asked.
Okay, good, but you certainly didn't mention it, correct?
No.
But you took that, there was an opportunity to sneak him some food, and you snuck him some food according to your testimony today, right?
Yes.
All right.
Translation: this is our first time hearing about this, isn't it? Translation: you made it up to make yourself look better, didn't you? You wouldn't do that now, would you, Paul? Also, I want to take a moment to point out Paul's facial expression and the over-exaggeration of confusion. And the reason I want to point this out isn't for Paul. I actually believe that his confusion here is genuine. Paul has a 300 IQ, and sometimes his brain functions a little bit differently than the rest of us. However, I do think it is worth mentioning for Shonda, because I think that when she fakes her confusion later on the stand, I believe that the person she is using for her inspiration to fake that confusion is her son Paul here.
You work at Applebee's, right?
Yes.
Do they make food at Applebee's?
Yes. Unfortunately, I can only get one free meal, and I don't always remember my credit card because I don't have it on me.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I might actually like this defense attorney. He's got a job to do, and by God is he here to do it. Alright, do they make food at Applebee's? Just the way he said that. It's the showmanship of it. I gotta say, if this defense attorney was defending anyone else, I would be much more ecstatic to watch him work. But I'm rooting for him to lose, and spoiler alert, he loses. We all knew that. He knew that coming into this, that this was an unwinnable case, but this defense attorney is going to give it everything he's got and respect him for it. Now, I'm also going to point out how it's just excuse after excuse after excuse for Paul. He expects us to believe that in the, I think, 6 month period they began to starve Timothy, that in that 6 month period, that not once he could not have snuck food from Applebee's to help him, that he could not have put some appetizers in his bag, that he couldn't have used his free meal, that he couldn't have stolen something out of the trash for Timothy. So this excuse is so paper thin that I want to say it blow away with the wind, but then Eminem might get mad at me.
You have to pass a Walgreens or a convenience store, a gas station or something, correct?
At 1 a.m, everything would be closed.
Gas stations wouldn't be closed, right?
Bro, well, the excuses never end.
Did you ever go into any place before work or after work to buy your brother a candy bar to bring him home and help him out?
No.
And this right here is really the crux of why I can't stomach Paul. And all of this time, he never considered helping his brother. And he's this anime-loving, this hero-loving person. Bro, there is a responsibility in front of you, and you have the power to change it. And you did nothing.
There were numbers of monitors in that house, right? Video
Yes.
monitors?
Yes.
But they weren't all for Timothy, is that correct?
There was one that was in G's room
Okay.
because, according to Shonda, he had a tendency to remove all of his clothes and wander around in his room like that.
But that's when he was 2, right? He's older than that at this point, isn't he?
That was what I was told. It was what
Okay.
I believed.
I can't help but think back to what the sister Millie, I think her name was, said about Shonda. She said that one of her earliest memories was of them being taken away by CPS. And I think she also said that Shonda wasn't very present, but when she was, it was in these sexual ways. I think this is one of them. I think that Shonda's idea of punishment is oddly sexual for some reason. And I can't shake the violation aspect of it. That's something that, goes, that we don't really want to talk about. There's a level of violation of what she's doing that's just, it's literally demonic is the only word I can think of.
What do you know about her? How far has she gone in school?
She's graduated from law school, second in her class.
Yeah. Were you impressed by that?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's worked. Did you know she was the judge's clerk?
That's what it was called.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Both
I was
here
trying to figure out what the name was.
That's fine. Both here and in Nuevo.
Yeah.
Okay. Ferguson.
Vander Ark.
Vander Ark. I'm sorry, Vander Ark. I should have figured that out, right? Adam Vander Ark, her husband, had a stroke. Is that correct?
In January, yes.
Was he working prior to that?
Yes.
Okay.
And here we are. We have arrived at the catalyst for all of this abuse. The husband, Adam Vander Ark, having a stroke and leaving the home. This meant that Shauna didn't have to pretend to be a good person anymore. This meant that she can let her mask slip. And that's exactly what happened.
So there's a lot going on with her at this point in her life, isn't there?
Yes.
And you're not just babysitting, she's relying upon you to watch the kids, is that correct? When she's at work, you watch the kids. When you're at work, she watches the kids, correct?
Alright, so this is actually really weird to me because it almost seems like that she had a weird incestuous, or at least emotionally incestuous relationship with Paul. They have this sub-dom thing going where he's submissive to her and she gives him praise. I was about to say it, but I can't even say it. Anyway, there's this weird co-parenting / incestuous relationship here, element here that's just, it's disgusting. Ugh. Shonda is literally the worst human garbage, human feces. Jesus, woman. Ugh.
Do you remember telling Detective Piskey we weren't neglecting him, and even if we were, it wasn't intentional?
Somewhat.
You remember that?
Yes.
That's true, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
That's true, isn't it? It wasn't intentional, was it?
Not on my part.
No.
Not on his part. How self-serving. But I do believe that is a true statement. The neglecting that Timothy endured was not intentional. Because it wasn't neglect, it was torture.
You're putting this young man in the shower, right? Correct?
Yes.
And you gave him 3 showers, right? That you can remember? 3 baths?
Yes.
Okay. So you know what his body looked like.
I found myself getting very, very angry. This makes me angry. Shonda said that she relied on Paul to do his baths. Paul said he did 3 baths that he can remember. 3 baths in a 6 months period. What the fuck were you thinking, Shonda?
I haven't had it diagnosed and I don't know how to explain it.
That's fine. Do
But I'd say it's something similar to Stockholm Syndrome.
Okay.
I have a desire to find a role model that, due to my own low self-esteem, I would do anything to make proud of me.
Okay.
And that's not an excuse, I know, but I feel like I'm glad that I was at least able to realize it so I can correct it.
Paul, you've been in jail for, 2 years by this point? If you don't have it diagnosed, you don't have it. That's just the reality of it. You're just a shitty person. There is no Stockholm Syndrome. There is a need to please for low self-esteem, but what Paul fails to realize is that you, as a man, cannot find self-esteem from pleasing someone else. It doesn't work like that. And I'm sorry to say, but both his mom and his dad failed Paul in the fact that he doesn't even understand something so basic, and that he is literally using every excuse he can to excuse his actions at every opportunity while saying, oh, it's not an excuse. Then why are you using an excuse?
And I'm not trying to excuse my own actions.
Well, yes, you are.
He's right, you are.
I disagree. Let me ask you this. Do you have a cell phone?
Yes?
What happens when you have your cell phone and you press 911?
You're connected to the
There you
cops.
go.
Oh.
You did say no to her when she asked you to put hot sauce on his penis.
Yes.
It was in the bathroom when the police arrived? I'm not so sure.
We found this metal shackle, the chain, leg chain. Were you familiar with those?
A little bit.
Did you put those on him?
When I was directed to.
When you Is there, as you sit there right now, do you love Timothy?
That's a good question. One that cuts to the heart of this case. Let's see how Paul answers.
I suppose I didn't love him enough.
No,
It's
that's
why
not-
I'm trying to bring justice for him.
What a piece of shit. Even in his death, he can't bring himself to say that I loved him. Timothy's a stranger to me and I care more about him than his brother did, and that is wild. And I know he does have a brother and a sister that did love him, and I know he has G, who was seemingly brainwashed against Timothy, but I have no doubt that they're going to correct that with time, and I wish all of them healing and therapy, except Paul. I really do wish all of them healing and therapy. All of it. Please.
I say that I loved him during the time
You loved
before
him?
his death.
Yes. Did you love him before his death?
With all the ways I acted, I cannot.
Okay. Let
Unfortunately.
me ask you this.
Paul, what was the point of even posing that? If this was the same Hail Mary that his mother's going to attempt later. This is what I mean by they are birds of a feather. They are the same person, just different generation, gender. That is it. She tries something similar, a similar Hail Mary for sympathy, and it rings just as hollow. Alright guys, I think this is going to be it for this video. I might do the part 3 of the prosecutor. I might skip it depending on what's left. I need a break. At some point there was a mood change. I'm not sure when, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining me here today, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, and take care of yourself.
They not like us. 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 They not